Okay, so welcome everyone to our open forum on our webinar series, A Bundle of Silences, Reimagining Interpretive Approaches to the Past. My name is Mark Lawrence. I am the program coordinator at the New Jersey Historical Commission, and I've been working together with our partners at Crossroads of the American Revolution as our entity Revolution NJ to create a couple of professional development opportunities, which we're super excited to discuss and talk about today. So just a quick overview of what we hope to achieve in today's quick open forum is really just provide the background behind why we created this particular series, what influenced it, and what we're hoping to achieve with it. And then dive into the actual professional development series itself, why we named it A Bundle of Silences, the process of creating the webinar series, and then a little bit of an overview of what you can expect to find when you do click into the material resource folders. And then we'll also spotlight some upcoming events that we have planned for the professional development series, and then we'll open up and end with some questions and answers at the end. So if you have any questions or answers that come to mind, just feel free to type them in the comments section while we're doing the presentation, and we'll definitely get to them if we have the time. So as you are aware that we've released the strategic framework last year, which really highlighted the goals for Revolution NJ as an initiative. And one of the big ones that we had was to tell a diverse and inclusive story about America's past that invites participation from all New Jerseyans. In order to achieve this goal, we wanted to give folks who are creating programming for the 250th the tools for them to explore those types of questions and those types of ideas. Our idea with the professional development series is to really provide the platform for folks to really get interested and start their research and then move forward in whatever direction that they feel most comfortable with when it comes to creating programming for their site. This, as you can see, goes into our second goal of really encouraging the growth of organizational capacity. We want to really elevate the education in the state too, by creating a number of resources that allow people to take part in the 250th in a way that is really in line with the current discussions occurring in scholarly research and in public programming. And when we're hoping that this ties into our larger civic engagement goal of really demonstrating how diving into the nuance of our history helps us respond to the present and prepare for the future. So the webinar is based around our interpretive framework. This is a document that we released on our website, www.history.nj.gov, that has 7 themes that we are hoping to explore in the 250th. These were put together by a scholar summit, a number of listening sessions with constituents throughout the state, and organizations that are interested in really engaging the public. So these ideas were not only discussed and worked through these various groups, but we also came to a common idea of what it might be by putting together that interpretive framework, which really highlights exactly what we're hoping to explore with these themes. So the idea was to create this document, which will help push people really explore that American Revolution moment, and then the 250 years that occur after. So what are some of these ideas that might have been floating around during that 1776 moment, and how have over the last 250 years have they been enacted, envisioned, challenged, struggled with, questions like that. That's kind of our background of where we're trying to really push this professional development series, is to make sure that this interpretive framework document is approachable and accessible, and that folks kind of have an idea of how to use it and what it could look like when you put it into action. So in order to do that, we've created a professional development series, which has a couple of parts. If you were joining us last week, we had a panel session on what is the American Revolution. That was recorded and is available on our YouTube channel. But the idea of those big ideas panels are to get folks to think about theories, approaches, questions that they might not typically engage with, but are interested in learning more about, and then how to really incorporate those into our larger programs. that's the first part, is really to create this foundational, this foundation of ideas and approaches that we can look into and then integrate into our programming at historic sites, at different organizations throughout the state. Part two of this professional development series is the webinar series that we're talking about today, which is a bundle of silences, right? This is a pre-recorded, produced webinars from 7 scholars who are really looking at each theme and diving into it a little bit more in depth. We wanted to show how those themes are approached by someone who might be reading an interpretive framework for the first time and what ideas sparked them to create the programs that they did. We're following this up with in-person workshops later on this year in order to put this all into action, to get folks really brainstorming and creating the programs themselves. And the last part, which was coming during the winter 2022, so probably in a month or two, we'll have the handbook out, which will be really diving into how folks who are not historic organizations, how they can take part in this. And if you are an organization that is civic-minded and engaged in that kind of manner, that this handbook would be sort of guiding you towards how you too can take part in the 250th. So today's topic is really looking at the webinars themselves. And the big question that I want folks to really think about and grapple with is why a bundle of silences? This is a book called Silencing the Past by Michelle Rove-Trio, who looks at the effects of power on the production of history. He calls attention to how history is a process and that there's gaps in the records and that there's silences in the record that need further exploration. And that's something that we want folks to walk away with thinking about when they do look at these webinars, is that we are constantly learning something new about the past. New things are being uncovered, and to keep an open mind on what we thought was a historical record or what we thought was a historical fact might actually be approached differently, or it might be seen in a different light. So we took that inspiration and called the series A Bundle of Silences, Reimagining Interpretive Approaches to the Past. That is sort of our rallying call for this webinar series. We had the distinct privilege of working with Bob Suter, who helped us create all the video production of these webinars. He was tremendous help in really streamlining the look, right? We had 7 scholars who were recording these webinars on Zoom. So we had as you can probably imagine, there's some different qualities of cameras and things like that we were working together, and Bob did an amazing job on streamlining everything. We approached 7 scholars based on their research experiences and their specialties. We wanted folks to really come from a different backgrounds, different time periods, really dive into ways in which this interpretive framework can explore the American Revolution, but also events after the American Revolution. We want folks to walk away with an idea that there's something in these 250 years of history that we in the state of New Jersey can contribute a story to or explore. The scholars were given the interpretive framework and basically charged with two things. One, take the framework, look at the overview of it, and whatever sparks your interest, create a webinar based on that. The second part was to create additional reading list and an FAQ document that would help them really get deeper into this subject matter if someone gets super interested in their presentation. The scholars were working off of the interpretive framework documents in the sense that we wanted them to provide, in the first half of the webinar videos, a overview of the concept and the theme, really provide that background. So someone who has never heard about a particular topic has some familiarity where or how to approach the idea of the movement of people or something like the historical process. And then from there, they would go on to providing a case study showing exactly how, once you kind of develop that context and background, you're able to apply the interpretive framework to analyze a particular case study. We're hoping that this is sort of going to inspire folks to do a similar approach at their own programming. and that, there's going to be a number of different sites looking at multiple themes, not just one, or maybe even new themes that we didn't even capture in our interpretive framework. All of this material was reviewed by our advisory council. We have members of the Revolution NJ Advisory Council taking a look at all the webinar material and then providing feedback. That was then given to the scholars who edited their videos and then sent it back to Bob, who produced what you're looking at today, or what is available today. So our 7 scholars are Dr. James Gigantino, who did the interpretive theme of New Jersey as a battleground, Dr. Jimmy Sweet, who did property and sovereignty, Dr. Elena E. Roberts, who did inclusion and exclusion, Dr. Andrew Shankman, who did revolutionary ideals, Dr. Kathleen Lopez, who did movement of people, Dr. Martha Jones, who did political participation, and then Dr. Edward Gonzalez Tennant, the historical process. So I'm going to stop the presentation for a second and walk you through, or the PowerPoint for a second. I'll walk you through how to access all this material and where it's located. As you see here in this presentation, you just have to go to history.nj.gov, and all of the material that you'll need is located there. But let me show you how that looks. Okay. So when you get to the website, you'll have this banner that's up here on top of this site. If you click into it, you'll go right to the page that has all of the documents that we need. This is sort of our professional development hub, right, for the Revolution NJ. You'll see that it has the big ideas, concepts for the 250th, what the next panel is coming up. It'll have that information available for registration, and also the link to the recordings. But then you also see all of the material related to the video webinar series. So I'm scrolling past the big ideas section, and now you'll go down to this part, which is a bundle of silences. You'll see a quick overview of the series, and then you'll see highlighted here an overview of the documents. If you click into that document, it'll open up a Word document that has an overview of the series and the link to the YouTube playlist, and then every particular webinar, it'll have a picture of our scholar, an overview of their webinar, followed by a biography of the scholar. And then you'll see also in this link, if you click into any of these, it'll link right to the PDF for those particular extra materials that I mentioned earlier. So this would be the FAQ and additional resources document. They're both in the same location, the FAQ and the additional resources. And then if you go back to the previous document, it'll also have a link to the webinar transcript and image and credits. So folks who would like to take a look at that, it's available there. Our YouTube videos themselves are also closed captioned, so we're trying to make it as accessible as possible. And let's see, so we have the playlist. So if I click into that, you'll see all 7 videos located here. And I think we should probably show you an overview of what this looks like the first couple minutes if you haven't had a chance to watch these. And I can talk to you about some of the decisions we made behind why the intro looks the way it does and the format itself. So let's click into this one. And I realize I probably don't have the sound on, so let me double check to make sure that's playing now. There we go. All right, we're back.
Hello, I'm Edward Gonzalez Tennant, lecturer of anthropology at the University of Central Florida. I also regularly consult with various communities in support of grant writing, cultural resource assessment surveys, and other heritage-oriented activities. My primary interests center on the use of digital technologies to support the creation of local, inclusive histories. I previously taught at Monmouth University after receiving my PhD in anthropology in 2011 from the University of Florida. Today I'll be sharing some thoughts and ideas on the historical process. This includes talking about the relationship between historical narratives and facts, and the challenges facing interpreters who want to engage audiences in interpretations that are not only true, but perceived as true. Part of the challenge results from who writes history. We'll move beyond adages about winners writing history to think about the emerging ways of knowing the past. Ways that remind us how different people experience events in similar ways, or unique ways. These new approaches, which we'll refer to as doing history backwards, moves beyond simplistic linear narratives to embrace the complexity of historical narratives, to celebrate the messiness of writing history. This leads to a discussion of where historical data comes from and the silences that can often result if we only focus on authorized sources or authorized archives. All of this reminds us of our obligations to the public to craft transparency in the historical process. We'll also explore the sources of historical data, including creation of inclusive archives through processes like oral history. I'll briefly discuss other sources, some familiar, like the federal census, and others perhaps a bit more obscure, like historical aerial photographs and topographic maps. I'll also discuss how old and new sources of data present new opportunities of making these data interactive and exciting. Finally, I'll present a couple brief case studies from New Jersey and elsewhere, projects that drew on these emerging trends to meaningfully engage the past, present, and future.
So that was just a small clip from one of our scholars, Dr. Edward Gonzalez Tennant, on the historical process. And you'll see a similar pattern in our webinars, right? We'll have a scholar kind of do a broad overview of what they're going to be talking about. And then you'll get a little bit of more information on that larger context, followed by a case study at the end. And they also have in their material, they'll have all of their sort of additional questions that you typically would get from folks who are watching this for the first time. We ask them to kind of preemptively think about how an audience might react to their webinar if they've never seen the particular topic being discussed or heard any questions about that. So that's sort of my quick overview of the webinar series, and I would love to leave time just to have folks ask any questions. Feel free to comment in the chats, or if you want to turn on your microphone and your video and ask me a question live, I am totally fine with that too. I want to create an open space where we can talk about how to use this best for you. All right, we have a couple of questions. What type of resources do the scholars share with their videos? How can we use those? That's a great question. Let me go to a sample document to show you exactly what kind of resources you'll be able to find here. So if we go back to our overview document, we'll scroll down to, I particularly remember Dr. Jimmy Sweet's additional readings being well crafted. So I'm going to pick on him today because he separates it out topically. So the resources that you would see here are really kind of a mixture of books, websites, primary documents, things that get you to kind of dive into a topic a little bit deeper. What Dr. Sweet did was he really kind of provided an overview first, and then specific topics that he mentioned throughout his presentation, such like colonialism. he provides you a number of resources of how to get introduced to that particular concept. The same goes with property and sovereignty. He'll list a number of things that he was working off of and that are a good introductory text for someone who might want to dive into that idea a little bit further. Okay, let's see, what else do we have in the questions? All right, we have another question. Do you recommend that organizations hoping to plan Revolution NJ programs utilize these webinars and resources? Yes, I really think that anyone who, even if you're not going to be planning a Revolution NJ program, should take a look at these webinars and resources. The scholars that we were able to put together into this series, when you look at all their videos together, it's a very coherent piece that really explores the complexity of those ideas that the founding fathers and everyday people were really grappling with in 1776. And yet it also provides a way of exploring those ideas throughout the 250-year history that follows, and how those ideas were envisioned, enacted, or still struggled with today. We're hoping that folks who are thinking about creating a program for Revolution NJ itself, that they do really grapple with the goals of the strategic framework and the interpretive framework. And we're aware that there's a lot there, right? And that sometimes it can feel overwhelming. What we want folks to really walk away with is that everyone has a story to tell, and every place has a particular way of contributing to the 250th. You don't have to include all 7 interpretive themes in your programming. It could even be just parts of the interpretive themes. It's just meant to have you kind of reflect on some ideas that you might have seen in the past, but not really have grappled with or engaged with in sort of like a more nuanced way. We're really hoping that this is an opportunity for people to kind of revisit their interpretations and really dive into this complexity, to really engage the public in a way that brings them in based on the interpretations that you are going to be providing. Another question, will there be opportunities to meet with others and share ideas for programming for the 250th? I would say absolutely. You know, the 2026 is 4 years away, and we've been planning Revolution NJ for a number of years now. And there's been a lot of work behind the scenes. We're probably getting to that point now where a lot of folks are starting to really think about what they're going to do for 2026. And we really want to encourage that folks do start reaching out to us, to each other, to start thinking about how folks can work together, right? I think one of our big goals is to really break apart that siloing you sometimes see in the historical communities, really look at each other as partners and working together as sites and pushing each other to each other's sites and collaborating. And we're hoping that, you know, apart from looking at that strategic goal, that also doing Revolution NJ's interpretive work and going through the professional development series, that there's sort of an inspiration in doing this type of work. And there's a question about, is the New Jersey Historical Commission going to make grant funds available for Revolution NJ projects? Yes. So we have our current project grant opportunities, and for the upcoming years, we strongly encourage folks who want to do programming for Revolution NJ or for the 250th to really put in an application to our project grant application process. We're strongly considering funding programs that are going to be commemorating the 250th. Is there anything planned for educators specifically to further utilize this series and the Big Ideas webinars? Yes. So at the end of March, we do have a plan right now for a separate educators workshop where folks can attend and get a in-depth overview of both the Big Ideas panels and the professional development webinars that you saw today. And the idea is to provide professional development credit for the teachers themselves, but also to provide additional resources and particular approaches that folks can use when trying to implement this into their education curriculum. And we do have a number of other events coming up, including that education workshop that's in late March. We're gonna have a advertisement for that coming up and promotional material in the coming months, so keep an eye out for that. Our next big panel session is on Friday, February 25th from 12 o'clock to 1 p.m. And that panel session is looking at what is identity. And we have two anthropologists, Dr. Rachel Watkins and Dr. Swati Shah, discussing that concept with our moderator, Dr. Jesse Baker. We're super excited to approach that idea from a very holistic approach to see how that kind of way of discussing and thinking about identity can help folks create more complex and nuanced historical narratives. So please keep an eye out for that one. And that, once again, that was Friday, February 25th from 12 o'clock to 1 p.m. And I believe there is a registration link that is now being posted in the chat room for that. Okay, are there any other questions that are coming through from Facebook or Zoom?
Nothing from Facebook, Mark.
Awesome, thank you so much, Greer. Well, I'd like to say thank you for everyone who attended today. If there's any questions about what we discussed today or the webinar series in general, feel free to email me. I will put my contact information in the chat room. And yeah, let's keep the conversation going. We're super excited that, you know, folks are starting to think about programs, that there's different material being made available now, and that this conversation is really starting to get rolling. All right, well, have a good afternoon, and please take care.